So here's a quick video of why currently deliveries of Airbus 380 are either dumb or really poorly optimized. So for example, we have a lot of liveries here, and some of them are just insane. Like for example, this one has 1.7 gigabytes. So let's look at this particular one. We have inside a lot of folders and files, and the textures folder is the main thing that loads up. So we have a lot of textures here, and we can sort by type. We can understand that the JSON files are just text files and they weigh nothing, 3 kilobytes, right? This is a thumbnail. It has under 1 megabyte. It's pretty big, but and we have a texture CFG, which is a texture text file. This is a text file, just in case people don't know what the JSON files are. Just some text with some information how the said texture should be managed. So let's take a look at these files. These files have 20 megabytes. This means 20 megabyte. In case people have, so it's 21.3 megabytes, right? They're in kilobytes here. So this one is 90. So what do we know? This of 20 megabyte is a 4K texture. So we can see this is a 4K. We can see this in the corner. It says 4096, which means 4K. And this can be even 1K. It's really nothing. It contains nothing. What do I mean by nothing? It contains not important information. First of all, there are no details. Everywhere you can see colors. They are not real details. They are just a color. This is a color white. This is a gray. This is black. Most probably where it's black, it's nothing. And then these stripes are connections. So these things, they don't appear in game. These are connections between the texture parts that are used. So for example, this gray area will be used, but this gray part with the stripes is not used. It's an after effect after exporting the file from the 3D program they use to, like Blender or 3ds Max, something like that. So the only information, real information that is used is this thing, and the black most probably is not used. So what do you lose if you make this texture smaller? So you might lose, for example, at the bends and corners, you might lose some accuracy. However, because this is a gray, plain gray color, you don't really see anything. And then on top of all this, you have to understand what is this. These are just some frames that are appearing, they are just texturing, that appear in the windshield glare. So for example, it says here Airbus 380 cockpit windshield frame. So if you really zoom into the cockpit windshield frame, you might see some details, especially in VR, like I'm now in VR. You might see some color shading or something weird, but you really need to be 1 millimeter away to see this. And most people don't look at this. However, we have this, it's 4K. People don't understand what a texture is. There are a lot of people that do textures and they don't really understand what the hell is a texture. They just export it. They even use resize. They don't even bother with AI, for example, to resize it with something. They make a texture 8K, but it's done from a very small texture like 2K or 4K, and is simply resized. And what it means when a texture is simply resized? Resize means, let's say, I have a texture from here, right? And I say, so this is the texture, right? This is a texture. It has a lot of details and so on. If I simply resize it, it just enlarges this part. Like, let's imagine it does this. So you can see as the texture gets bigger, it starts to get blurrier. Or if I go into this program, into options, and I say don't resample, this is also resample, like using AI, but it's the former AI. Haha. And this texture will become pixelated. Every pixel is just enlarged, and you will see the squares of the pixels. Because this program is set to actually resample, it will blur the texture. It certainly looks better than pixelated, but you lose detail. So if you resize a texture twice or quadruple, you make it from 1K, 2K to 4K or 8K, that means 3 times or 2 times, and then all the details you think you get, you don't actually get. You just resize the same information. So imagine you have a text. This is like a text, and it's like a story. If you copy the text and you multiply it several times, it's the same story said several times, 2 times or 3 times, and so on. You don't add anything to the story. There is no information. Imagine there was a fly on this tail of the plane. If I just, and the fly was not captured by the camera because the camera was too weak, the sensor was too weak, or the picture is just too small, so the fly disappears. The fly is black, but is now disappearing in this blue part. So there is no fly. It's gone. If I enhance, like in the stupid movies that brainwashed all the people, if I enlarge the texture, the fly does not appear. Even AI will not make the fly appear because the AI will assume there is no fly, a goddamn fly on the tail of the plane, right? So if I enlarge this, I don't add anything. You can see I add actually just some noise. You can start seeing some specks of different nuances of blue. That's just noise that is added. That's not detail. It's like I'm enlarging a text and some letters become destroyed a little bit. The story is the same. I don't add anything. However, if I have a fly that is blurred and I enlarge it and now I can see there was a fly but it's blurred, then I can say, oh, I wish I had a bigger resolution so I can see more of the fly or details of the fly or whatever it was there. So for example, you can see this plane here. It's quite blurred, and for sure it's not that blurred in the real plane. So you have to understand if your texture is 4K or 8K, does it add actual information, useful information? Because if it doesn't, then it's useless. Imagine this plane done for an older game. This tail would have been either red or blue. The whole detail of the trident or the planes here cannot be described. So it would have been just a simple speck of color, like the old games, like Flight Simulator old game. So for example, the frame here, returning to this texture, for sure in the real life this is not a full white. Even after painting the plane, if you zoom in with your own eye on the frame of the plane, you will see details. If you use a microscope, you will see details popping up. This is reality. This is how it works. But you cannot capture them. And you just simply imagine it's just plain white and so on. So now let's go. So we talked about this kind of textures that don't really have anything, and they are in places that don't describe anything. It's just stupid to go crazy with details. You have some nuts, bolts, or rivets or something. That's good. You can have them, but you don't need them at super high resolution anyway. Because they are, why I'm saying this, because this is the texture and the bolt is actually described with a shape in 3D. So for example, in 3D, if I have a bolt or a rivet that is round and I put a texture that is square, the bolt stays round because it will be textures, like texture acts like a paint. Imagine I have a a paintbrush that is squared and I'm painting a round bolt, the bolt will stay round. It's the same color. The color is just affected. That's the idea. So now let's move to another texture. So I'm keeping in full screen and just go to another texture. Now this texture contains, unfortunately, this is on the fly-by-wire part. This texture contains useless, stupid information, let's call it this way, and also important information. This is something like on the engine or something, let's see. So exterior engine, yeah, so it's on the engine. So on the engine cowlings, we have these parts of the livery, which are fine. If we made them 8K, this is an 8K, 8,192 by the same number. So this is 8K. The problem is if you make this 4K or 2K, these round curves here, they will become squared. Why? Because if I zoom in here, you can see the pixels, the individual pixels starts to get jittery. This happens way earlier in game. You see these pixels here, they are the same problem. They start becoming visible. So you start seeing on the planes where the paint was supposed to be just a round decal, it's now jittery. It's now in this. So you can see how huge it is. So this is the problem. The curves cannot be maintained unless the resolution is quite big. So what can be done? And why is this important on this stupid texture? Because this texture, beside these small parts of the cowling that are important, only if they have curves. If they don't have curves, like this one, it's not that important. And also if they have decals with labels. You can see here is a warning label that is, even here, is not really clear. So you can see on 8K, the warning label is not really crisp. So this will be seen even if you go crazy with 8K. This blurred, for example, keep out of hazard area here, it's really blurred and not. This is not like in real life. In real life, this will be very, very clear. So you cannot do this. How can you do it? There are planes that do this. This is placed on a decal. What does that mean? It's a texture that is only this part. This part. People that have done in their life a plastic model, they know the decals. You have decals that you can glue on the plane and they contain crazy detail. And you don't need to paint with a huge brush that warning and keep up of hazard area. You just use a decal, you place it on your little model, and it will look excellent. This is possible also in Flight Simulator. You just need to have the developer of the plane to define the decals, where the position of the decals, where they will be placed, and then you can go crazy. The texture can be 1K, half a K or 8K. You can go crazy and people can complain and hey, we don't really need for a decal like this a texture of 8K. It will crash our system and so on. But if you keep the decals, you don't have decals, and then you have to define such details in a huge texture, then you have this problem. The guy that is doing the texture will try to enlarge the whole texture to crazy sizes. So we can see that yes, we would need details here, but this is again bullshit. These are parts that are placed inside the engine. Nobody will look there. Nobody. They are just small bits of the 3D shape of the engine that got UFV mapped out. So yeah, they have some colors. There is no texture here. Absolutely no texture. It's basically just a color. Imagine these are just somebody painting with a brush, this gray or white or whatever. It's no real information. There is no information. If it was a fly on this particular rivet or whatever there is, it's gone. There is no detail. Again, some parts are just artifacts of exporting. So these parts, they don't really appear inside the 3D shapes. They are just parts of the texture. So imagine, so how you can imagine this thing I'm talking. Imagine you put a lid on a jar, like you have a jar with something inside, and you put a lid, but you first put a plastic sheet on top, and then you put the lid. And you know the plastic sheet is square, the lid is round, and when you tighten, like your grandma did the jars of what's the name, whatever. So you understand what I'm saying. So if you have that plastic sheet, now you have to cut it. So you use a scissor to cut this plastic sheet away, and when you open the jar, you will have that plastic sheet cut all over the place in all sorts of directions, and they will look like this. This is how it looks. This is what happens with the textures that are like plastic sheets on the jar opening. So, as I said, on this type of texture, you have some details that maybe they were necessary, but now the texture creator, the livery creator, is now forced for these little details on the cowling. They are forced to use a huge texture that most of it, 80%, 90% almost, it's nothing, just nothing. And this grade, this gradient here is just nothing for a texture. It can be done simply by using the multi-texture, like the other type of texture, which is this one, which is the composite texture. So the composite texture contains 3 channels, red, green, and blue, and it will tell the game by each channel how the texture should look. Is it metallic? Is it plasticky? Does it reflect light more, less, and so on? And also the shades, where the shades are. So these are defined by these colors. And when you see blue, red, and green, you should, for a comp texture like this, you should not understand that, oh, this is a green part. No, this is a green, if I remember correctly, this is the part that is supposed to reflect light, and the red part is the part that is supposed to be the reflectiveness, and the blue part is the shades. For example, let's call it like, even if it's not wrong, it's blue, it's the reflection is just the same for explanation's sake. So anything you see here is nothing. So it's like somebody painting this color blue, and then with this color saying to the game, you should add some shadows here. And by painting this green, you're saying to the game, this should look like plasticky, not really metallic. And by painting this red, it says to the game, this should look more reflective, like a mirror. Mirror and metallic look, they are different. They can be confused, but they are different. So this is what this texture contains. There's actually nothing. The only thing that you see here, like the difference, the margin, the edge of the blue part, is just so the program stops. Hey, don't paint whatever is here with reflective or shyness from with shadow here, or shyness from red, or plastic from this green. Just at the edge. So only where this texture covers, make it look shiny. And for example, you can see some detail here, like scratches and so on. So what does this mean? This means, oh yeah, you make this look like plasticky, but the green that is darker look more plastic than the green that is a bit whiter. So it will create inside the plastic, it will create an illusion that this is has scratches that reflects, so, or give away the idea that the material, the plastic material, has scratches or reflects because of the scratches light differently. And this is a detail that if you have the resolution too small, it will be lost. But this is a detail in the scratches and not really in inside the material. You have to be very, very, very close to see this detail and to really care about it. So for example, let's say this part covers a part that has a text. So the text will, let's say the text is gray. The green part will not affect the gray. It will still look gray, but it will look scratchy or something like that and not reflective. But if this part, the red part, covers, then it will be the text, it will be reflective. So now if we understand all this, now we can understand how idiotic is to have a texture that is 8K for this. It's just the margins are not supposed to be precise anyway, so we don't need to define this. This is defined by a 3D shaped. So even if I make this round, this green stuff that has some shapes here, if I make it round, it will look the same in the game. It's no problem. However, if I have a part here that is in the game defined differently and needs to be blue here, and I make this round and we overlap this part, and that part, yes, it will look incorrectly. However, the resolution can help only that much. So at some point, the resolution in this type of files is useless. Why? Because there is a gap, always there is a gap between the places of the two objects. So let's say this is an object that is painted in one way, and this is an object that is painted differently. This gap between them is enough to make the program understand that it needs to paint them differently. So you don't need to go crazy on the resolution. However, this livery contains an 8K, so this texture that could have been probably even 1K or maybe 2K for making sure the separation between details is good enough. This texture now occupies at least four times the memory. So it just hogs even more the system. And let's not forget, this is the composite texture. What does this mean? It means the texture is actually loaded basically 3 times for each of the 3 channels, and then it's applied on top of the albedo texture, which is the texture, the real texture, whatever the cowls engine. This is the albedo texture. This is the same texture that is also 8K, and this is the same cowlings but albedo. So this is how the cowling will look from external view inside the game, and this is how it will reflect light with the red paint. You can see the red paint covers that. So you can see the red paint here is saying about how the light will be reflected. But this red is actually made of 3 channels. So this contains also green, but very little, contains also blue, but very little, and this is containing very little red and blue and so on. But for example, here, this gray, this almost gray green contains information about all the channels. So this adds to the problem, because this texture is now computed several times, because it's actually 3 textures. Of course, it's with just 1 channel of 8-bit channels, but it's just adding a lot of information for no good reason. So let's go further. This is again another albedo for other engine, another texture. 8K texture is the same texture. And now look at this. This is the wing. We can understand this is the wing. You can see parts of the flaps and so on, and some parts that are painted red. You can see that it's not really needed to have detail. You can see how it's painted. It's just smudged. You can see there is a part here that is red. You can search for it in game, but it doesn't have the shape here that you can see here. You can see just some pixels, because the actual shape that this thing paints is just inside of it. So what does it mean? So this is just information about how the light, it tends to be gray or dirty or something on the flaps or whatever. So really not that important information. And then we can think, okay, so what's an important information? Well, one important information that can be overlooked is this line. This line is a line that appears on the wing. And yes, it has a stencil line that is gray. It should be actually out of full screen for this. So let's go here. We can see this line looks very well, but if we zoom in, it starts to break apart. So that means if this line would be of lower resolution, then it will break apart in game. However, this line also could have been done in stencils, or we can live with it in a lower resolution. Maybe at 4K, not 8K, it's still acceptable. It will be just slightly blurry. However, then we can see that the whole thing, the whole reason why this texture was done 8K is for this silly registration number. For this is the whole thing, actually. So here we have the real McCoy. In order to have these crisp letters, they are inverted, but there's no problem. In game they look correctly. So in order to have this registration appearing without blur, without jagged edges inside the game, we have the whole stupid texture done in 8K. So we can understand now that how easy would be to have this stencil, just this texture, even smaller, like you can imagine it can be like this, and then rotated by the game, like the game does the normal registration number. You know, when you enter in your game your registration number, whatever it is, and it appears very well. This is how it's supposed to be. The only problem in the Fly-by-Wire team has to have this defined as a stencil, and then defined by a texture or by a font. You can even use a font, so you don't even need a texture. You can use a font like Times New Roman, whatever, and then you say paint with that font this color on this place of the wing, and then the information is added, and very little memory is consumed by because of that. The paint looks exceptional. It's vectorized basically, and you don't consume memory, and it looks the best. But still, we have to take this bullshit with 8K or whatever. They will start providing even 16K just to have some silly numbers not looking blurry or pixelated. Let's go further. The same wing, now it's 8K for the comp. This is just paint, as I said, about how the wing should reflect light. Where it has shadows, you can see shadows under the wing nacelles here. It's the channel that controls the shadow, and then how reflective it should be, the red channel, and the parts that look green and yellow, it's how plasticky, how metallic or plasticky it should look. And this is also 8K. Useless, absolutely useless information for the scratches. Okay, so this is the only thing is the scratches. So in order to have the scratches, and also the scratches can be applied like a stencil. If you are smart enough, you can do like a noise, and you can add in places, because it's not like, oh, this scratch actually exists on this plane in this shape in this part. No, it's just some noise that is pre-added by the texture artist. You can have a noise texture and then adds itself in certain area. So some games, I don't know if Microsoft Flight Simulator has this, but some games can add scratches dynamically, because it's just exactly like you add it in the program that creates the texture, exactly like that you can add it live in the game engine, probably Unreal Engine. So this is the other side of the same wing, that this side doesn't even have the number. So only for that stencil, let's call it part of the wing with the black or gray line, we have it now in 8K. This is the details. Again, same wing, the upper part has now the definition, and here we can see the reflectiveness changes where the gray line is. So, okay, also when you zoom in, you will see the gray line not being so reflective. So this wing, the part of the wing that is red, will be more reflective, and the part of the wing that has this line will not be reflective. Like you add a black paint on something white that reflects a lot of light, and the black paint, it's not actually reflective. It's a paint that is non-reflective. It can be reflective, but this actual paint is not reflective. So this shows to the program that this should not be so reflective. Okay, and that part of so not reflective is now in high quality. So if you zoom in, you will not see the reflection on that small paint jagged. That's the only reason you have this. I mean, who gives a damn about that? Let's go further. It's really dumb. This is the winglet of the wing. 8 freaking K. You have to understand that if you have like the whole body of the plane is 8K, okay, you want to have a lot of details. But that's the winglet. It should be way smaller, or the body should be way bigger. If you need to put 1,000 flies on this part and you need to have them all visible, that means that also the million flies on the body of the plane have to be visible. Otherwise, you will see the difference. The body will be blurred. So then the body should be 16K or 32K or whatever. Just go all crazy. So for this, you need 8K, and you can understand this is a shape. This is a shape. So you don't need whatever this edge line, the quality of this line is not important. There is nothing. This is where the object, the 3D object of the winglet ends and the painting ends. And on the other side it's blank, and there is a distance between them. When you do the UFV wrapping around. And also, there is no detail. There is just no detail. So you enlarge, enhance, in quote unquote, this texture for nothing. It contains nothing but this paint. This can, if you do this paint, if you resize it, this texture, and you make it half a K, like 512 by 512, you will see no difference. You cannot see the difference because this is how it works. So you do it 8K, like 8 times or something like that, 16 times bigger for nothing, for absolutely nothing. And then, just to go even more dumb, you do the comp texture that contains only how this texture should be reflected, how the light is reflective, and so on and so forth. In 8K, you can see there is no fucking difference, no detail, nothing. There is nothing in here, just stupidity. And then we have something that, yeah, this is something that it's really difficult to do without resolution. Why? So if you remove the text, Malaysian and the flag, then the texture that remains can be lower. So then you think, okay, so can we use a stencil or like a label? See, yes, you can, but then you have to be able to have these textures. Let's say you don't want to use a font, you just need to use a texture, but you want to use just a texture that let's use this one. So you want to use the texture that is just here, okay? You can see already this is 8K, and you can see already it has jitters. So this would be better done by a font. You have the font, the official font of this livery of this company, and if you have the official font, then you can make the text appear exactly like on the plane. Of course, it's an official font because they don't use Times New Roman or sans serif or something. They use an official font of that. And also this thing can be like a font or a texture, the flag. However, what you my PC struggles when I go through these textures in full screen. So, for example, for the lines here, this is impossible to do with a font, so you will need a texture. But this is really not detailed because, as I said, these parts, they get cut off. You can see the edges. So actually the used information is way inside where the gray part is. So for this part, you either use stencil, even if you use a stencil that covers the text and the flag and the logo here, is still you can optimize it. But this has to be defined in the plane, and then of course the plane has a problem because maybe on one company has the name of the company written like this, and one company has the different way written the name. It's bigger, it's taller, it's lower, and so on. So either you need to cover the plane with a lot of stencils, placeholders for stencils, so you have this ability to place different stencils for different companies or whatever the guy wants to paint the plane, and so on. And then again, silly to use the comp file that has no information. You can see the plane is set, basically you reflect the light all the way the same way. You have these marks, I don't know if they are visible, they are for the worn or dirty look in some textures. That's the only thing. So if we go to next texture, here we have a bigger problem. This is acceptable, however it still can be done because there are a lot of companies that use this type of stencils. You can do a stencil, or even in the worst case, you have just this texture that is big and the rest of the textures are not necessarily big. And you can see this texture has this part where it needs detail, but this lower part does not need. This is just some parts of the plane that really have no information inside. You cannot see details. And we go further, and this is the same texture, but now in comp and also in 8K. And the problem is, okay, you want to keep this in 8K because you want to transmit detail, but the detail is gone. You see, the plane should reflect the light in the white part some way, and in the blue and black or darker part differently. And this should appear, these bands should appear in this comp texture. You should see them like different reds and some blue and some yellow, and that would mean for the game, yeah, you see the blue and the almost black color, they don't reflect the light like the white part where is the red. But there is no such thing, so it's again another useless use of texture and memory. And the same on this part. This is the end part for the registration number. Usually it's for the registration number and the stencils here of the stripes on the plane. And you have also the dirt that can be, okay, you can have it done by the texture or by the comp texture. You can see in the comp textures also where the dirt or scratch exists is more yellow. So very little texture you have in need of such dimensions. You can still optimize. You can still even break apart the plane textures in more parts. So here is the tail, I think, or the horizontal tail. And again, they are in 8K, just careless. This is like carelessly making the tail the same size of the plane or the same size of the winglet, and then the comp texture just carelessly the same size. These are parts that are mostly internal parts 8K, because why not? Just to have, oh, it's 8K, and some lines that are really not important. And this goes on. And finally we have the thumbnail. And this thumbnail is also dumb, because in Microsoft Flight Simulator it's recommended to have the thumbnail, two thumbnails, one is big and one is small, and the two thumbnails are just hundreds of pixels in size, so way smaller. Why? Because they cannot be seen in game. You cannot zoom on that thumbnail. That thumbnail appears like a small window where you see your texture, your livery. So you don't need to have them big, and you don't need to load that silly huge thumbnail inside the game engine. You can see here, hopefully, it says it has 600 kilobytes. So it's almost 1 megabyte. And not only that, this is the memory of the file, and then it says it occupies inside the memory 5 megabytes. Why? Because this is a JPEG. JPEGs are compressed, and when a JPEG is compressed, it has 656 megabytes, this particular picture. But when placed on the memory to fill up all these pixels, it occupies 5 megabytes. So just add silly stuff with the silly placed textures. And one other limitation of Microsoft Flight Simulator is you need these textures also for Xbox. So Xbox is even more limited, so they place this limitation. So this is the main problem with the texture. So the last thing, imagine you have more liveries. So you want this livery, maybe you have 30 liveries. So let's see how much these liveries, most of them are 4K. So for 30 liveries, now I have 21 gigabytes for 30 liveries. And if I had 30 liveries of 8K, like almost 2 gigabytes, you can imagine 60 gigabytes, almost 60 gigabytes for liveries. And what happens when you have planes, different Airbus 380 loading beside you with different liveries? They all get processed. They all get loaded. Even if not shown, they get loaded inside the memory. So everything bogs down to a halt because of this thing. And Airbus 380 is not the only plane that has this problem, but this is one of the latest. Just people don't get over this. Oh, let's use brute force, put a maximum amount of pixels, even if they don't define anything. Oh, we have a blurry speck of dust that was supposed to be a fly on the plane. Let's do it 8K. Okay. Rant over.